these people, the Southerners, are as good as anybody else once they are out of the environment. You have to take them out of this oppressive environment for which generations and generations have lived in.
Between 1880 and 1924, more than 4 million Italians immigrated to the United States in the first wave of Italian immigration. Most of them came from southern Italy, escaping abject poverty in an unstable political system where opportunity didn't just knock once, it never knocked at all.
They decreed that the South was a Razza Maledetta. You know what that means?
No.
First race.
Oh.
They could not ever develop. They could not ever become part of a civilized society.
Before 1861, the country of what is now Italy was a series of independent states. In 1860, Italian General Giuseppe Garibaldi set out to conquer the South, which was then known as the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies and ruled by the Bourbons. This was an effort to unify Italy into one country. Within 3 months, Garibaldi is successful in defeating the Bourbons and hands over southern Italy to King Victor Emmanuel II, who is King of Sardinia. The country of Italy is born. But the debate remains. Was northern Italy's quest for a unified Italy a unification or an occupation of the South? And was emigration from southern Italy a byproduct of Italian unification, or part of a perfect storm of events that pushed immigrants from the Mezzogiorno to the shores of Ellis Island? Dr. Salvatore Di Maria is a professor emeritus of Italian at the University of Tennessee. His book, Towards a Unified Italy, Historical, Cultural, and Literary Perspectives on the Southern Question, explores and refutes some of the long-standing thoughts and revisionist ideas on the political and social climate of the newly formed nation of Italy in the late 19th century.
The Southern Question would be the debate between the South and the North. The debate, which sometimes deteriorates into name calling and all that, one part of the country accusing the other. The South accusing the North about its poverty due to the fact that the North came and invaded the South and spoiled it of all its riches and so on. Mm-hmm. And it devastated it. The North is saying, well, you guys are the problem. We didn't bring the mafia down there. You didn't bring the corruption. We didn't bring the illiteracy. We didn't bring all the problems that for centuries had plagued the South.
In 2010, Italian journalist Pino Aprile wrote to Roni, "All that has been done to ensure that the Italians of the South became Southerners," a book which talks about the ill treatment of Southern Italians by the new unified Italian government in the North, and suggests that Italian unification was motivated by money. As Aprile states, Piedmont, or northern Italy, was full of debts. The Kingdom of the Two Sicilies was full of money. However, how much of the book is revisionist history and how much is the truth?
In fact, a lot of literature, you mentioned familiar with the Terroni?
Yes.
Book. Well, that happens at the beginning of the 20th century, of the 21st century.
Right.
There were so many books written about the South. The part of this debate I was telling about, where the meridionalisti, meaning those of the South, are continuing to write and defending the Bourbons, the culture and the political and the history of the Bourbons. They say, so much that they say that's not true, though.
Dr. Di Maria says illiteracy in the South under Bourbon rule was epidemic. He reports that 93% of Southern women were illiterate and 83% of men.
100% of farmers were illiterate. Compare that with 52 or 53% of the Northerners. That illiteracy is much higher than it was the Black Americans at that time here in this country. So when they say, oh, we have the best schools, come on.
To describe life under the Bourbons, Dr. Di Maria says it quite simply.
Absolute poverty. The infrastructure was non-existent. So there was no infrastructure, there was no transportation. So when you cannot move your goods, a farmer that grew some vegetables or products or whatever you, had a hell of a time trying to move that to a market.
Despite these descriptions of life under Bourbon rule, some people living in the South today remain nostalgic for the Bourbons. Dr. Stanislao Pugliese is a professor of European history at Hofstra University and has written several books on Italian history.
There is still in the South, even some friends of mine, I can put you in touch with them, who are nostalgic for the Bourbon regime. You know, there are still people who wish that Italy was a monarchy. Then mostly in the North. Then there are people in the South who want Italy to be a monarchy, but not that monarchy, because those people who are from the North, right? They want the Bourbon, they want like a Bourbon restoration. And every once in a while, one of these descendants, like in that ceremony, you know, shows up. And, you know, there is a kind of nostalgia for this. In Naples was always a very monarchistic city, you know, because the king was there, right? And so in Naples and other parts of the South, there is a kind of nostalgia for the monarchy.
Probably the most agreed upon issue with regard to Italian unification is the Northerners' treatment or view of those living in the South. In fact, as discussed in Aprile's book, the North preached a sort of scientific racism with regard to those living in the South.
That was a prejudice that was clothed with science. Anthropologists from the North argued that the Southerners were mentally, intellectually inferior.
In fact, they even named the Southerners Razza Maledetta, or cursed race.
They could not ever develop. They could not ever become part of a civilized society because they didn't have it. They couldn't grow beyond that restricted cranial circumference. You see what I mean? That was a huge argument, and this happened in early the century. I say that's not true. You let Southerners out of this environment, and they will be as good as anybody else. Look at the progress a lot of our immigrants have made abroad. They were the same people we're talking about, but once they got abroad, they became merchants, lawyers, and doctors, and so on.
In the second part of this episode, we will discuss the push and pull factors that led Italian immigrants to America, and we will also deconstruct the Great Assimilation. What price did Southern Italians make as they dove into the melting pot of American society?